Jay here for Stretford Paddock. This is the Paddock Podcast. Joining me, as always, is my friend and colleague, Mr. Joe Smith. Joe, it's just a great time to be a United fan.
Fantastic, isn't it?
This is just, I just feel so blessed. We're going to be getting into it because it does feel a bit doom and gloomy. Everyone's moaning. We're not very good. We keep losing football matches. City are better than us. VAR hates us. The manager might not know what he's doing. He's making silly statements. All the players are giving up. The Glazers are still here. What's the point? Well, there's always, a little bit of light in the tunnel, and there's always the option of just changing everything, which is what we're going to chat about today, because it might be time for a bit of an Old Trafford overhaul, as the title suggests. Not the manager, necessarily. I'm not there yet. But maybe some of the players, the backroom staff, the people above Erik Ten Hag. So we're going to be getting into all of that. So make sure, as always, you are getting involved in the chat and the comments and hitting that like button. Joe, where do you stand at the minute in terms of, let's get the first most obvious one out of the way. Erik Ten Hag. On my news this morning, I said that whilst I've been critical of the manager recently, especially over the weekend, and questioned some of his decisions, I still think he deserves more time and is the right man for the job. Now, there were a lot of comments on that video. Some of them agreeing, some of them disagreeing. It does feel like the questions about him and his suitability for the role are increasing, are gathering a little bit of momentum. I think the majority of fans, from what I gather, I don't know, but I think the majority of fans are still with him because they appreciate the fact we've got all these injuries, you've got the shambles that is the ownership and everything else going on. But there's a growing concern over some of his decision-making.
Well, I think we're in a position where you look at the decision he made yesterday, just to address that initially. The main one that got criticism was taking off Amrabat, bringing on Mount. And the other one was not starting Varane. And, okay, you might disagree with them, and I personally do disagree with them. However, there is just the possibility that no matter who played yesterday, City were going to win. Because they've got probably the best manager in the world, who's been there for 6 years, who has implemented his style to within a fraction of a percent of a degree of how he would like it, with the best squad in the world. So sometimes beating that is almost impossible. And maybe, if we'd have scored this, if we'd have scored that, if we'd have got a penalty, if that one didn't, we could have got some luck and we could have won. I'm not saying we'll never beat him. We beat him last season. But sometimes there isn't just a fix. There isn't always a solution. Sometimes you just lose football matches. The City game really almost isn't the worrying one for me. It's that every week this season, every week we go into games, and even the ones we win, we don't look very good.
No.
That's more worrying than losing to the best team in the world. It's one good performance
this season, isn't it?
The Palace one.
Which is against Palace reserves.
Yeah.
Am I being over,
we've had sort of sections of a good performance. First half against Spurs was good. I thought a lot of, we had a good section against Arsenal where we were on their level and we looked good and we made some chances. I thought, against Forest, after we were 2-0 down, we looked quite good. But again,
second half against Sheffield United.
Half against Sheffield United. There are these things where it's that was all right, that bit was okay, that fraction was all right. But in terms of controlling and dominating the game and easily winning it, Palace is the only one. Even first half against Galatasaray, I thought were quite good. But again, that's not enough.
I understand what the point you make. And I think to a certain degree you're right that you're facing one of the best teams in recent history, and a manager who's obviously been there a long time, and we've got a depleted squad, and it's very difficult to get a result against City at the best of times. And you look at, we were talking earlier, the players that were so important to us last season when we got that win at Old Trafford. Luke Shaw had a worldie, Casemiro, Fred, for different reasons they're not there. But there's still an element of, for me, when I saw that team, when I saw Reguilon not starting, I saw Lindelof at left back again, and then during the game, I know people are sort of divided on this as well, the Amrabat point. Some people saying, well, he wasn't tearing up trees, but you could see the role he was filling in that team, and it did seem a bit bizarre.
I think it made us worse when he came.
And what worries me is, I literally know less about football than almost anyone. And I think we can all agree on that.
I've been saying that for years.
And you're not alone. But even I could see it.
And
I'm not the manager of Manchester United, and nor should I be. So when you see the manager, you can see it yourself and you go, hang on a minute, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then what you feared that change would do happens.
And
that's a bit concerning.
And he obviously knows that you're going to start the attacking.
Yeah.
You're taking off. He's not an idiot, is he? You don't win multiple trophies back to back with Ajax like he did if you're shit at managing.
No.
He knows tactics. He's got his pro thing. He's got all his FIFA qualifications. So even if nothing else, he's read the books that we haven't read.
Yeah, of course.
He's like,
of course.
And you know, even someone like Solskjaer, who was by the end, you could say that he'd never read a tactical book in his life, and people would agree with you. He obviously has. He obviously knows more about tactics than we do, than anyone on Twitter who thinks because they've drawn a line on a screenshot that they're a fucking tactical genius. All of these lot know more than you about tactics.
Yeah.
All of them do. So he knows that you bring Mount on for Amrabat, probably gives you a bit less defensive security, but hopefully you can keep the ball a little bit better, or certainly progress the ball a bit better. You can do this, that, and the other. And obviously he tried it, and like you said, unfortunately it went the way of, this is the potential problem of doing this is X, and we saw X. Yeah. He wanted Y and we got X, and that's the problem. I just think we turn out like, and I sort of hate this phrase a little bit, but the old insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
If we sack Ten Hag now,
they say that in addiction a lot.
If we sack Ten Hag now, it is just doing what we did with Van Gaal, with Jose, with Solskjaer. It's just the same thing. So many things haven't changed, and what we keep doing is, let's change this, let's change the manager, let's change the manager, let's change the manager, and everything around him needs to change as well. Yes, you can't just blame, Rashford not scoring on the Glazers. They're not on the pitch, and it would be maybe even hilarious if they were. Maybe we could see them embarrassed if they're playing up front for Man United, but they're not up front. So the ability to put the ball in the back of the net isn't Avram Glazer's fault. However, the way that the club is structured, the fact that these are the cycles, the fact that we've gone from being the best team in the world for 25 years to being a mid-table at this point Premier League side, and the expectation and the problems that come with that is down to the owners. So some of it goes on them. Also, you look at the team that he had to put out there. None of the back four was first choice. If you could argue, if you think that Wan-Bissaka starts over Dalot, and he often does, none of the back four was first choice. That's an issue. Mm-hmm. Liverpool scraped top four when Van Dijk was injured. Last game of the season, what was it? Alisson scoring headers.
West Brom. Yeah,
second to last game of the season or whatever it was. Like, that was without Van Dijk and a few other injuries. We have a full back four out, and you go, no, you've still got to beat City. It's hard. It really is hard to win these games. But there are things that do need to change. Yeah. And short term, we'll sort of have a look at this, sort of short term and more medium to long term. Because short term, all Ten Hag can do is rotate players. Just tweak tactics here and there. There's too many games too quickly for him to do anything more radical than that. But we'll look at some players. So let's start with Marcus Rashford, because he's one that's been absolutely torn apart basically all season because he's been so poor. Do you think it's time to drop him?
Yeah.
Do you?
I love Marcus. I do. And I got pellets for saying that this morning on the news, but I do. I've said it all along. He's probably my favourite player. For things he does off the pitch, I do care about that stuff. And last season, everyone was loving it because he scored 30 goals. Yep. He had 39 goal involvements, I think it was, or something like that. I can't remember the exact figure, but it was a lot. Or it might be 41, actually. But this season, he looks lost. He does. And on Sunday, it was probably his worst performance for me, maybe ever. And he's had some stinkers, to be fair to the kid. But he didn't get going at all. He had that one pass to McTominay, was it? That I thought was really good. Yeah. And then he had the chance where he did the hard bit and chesting it down, but his finish was poor. But other than that, he did nothing. And he looked like he didn't want to be there. There was one where the ball came over, and you're thinking it was him and Kyle Walker. Attack that header. Attack it. Yeah. The only way you'll win that header is if you attack it. And he literally just stood and just sort of jumps up.
That's the one where Kyle Walker wins the first header and the second header, wasn't it?
And I'm like, I will never play football remotely to a level of someone like Marcus Rashford, not even in the same stratosphere. But even I can jump for a ball, or I can see how I've got to win a ball in the air. Yep. And he just sort of jumped like he thought, Kyle Walker's just going to get out of the way of this for me and let me have it. Like, there was no desire, and I hate using the word desire, because desire and passion are the most overused words in football, but they do apply at times. And there was no sort of desire there. It was just like, I'm going to jump, and hopefully Kyle Walker will get out of the way, and then I can win this header. Well, that's not going to happen. No. Why would Kyle Walker do that? And he didn't. He didn't do it twice. So I just feel with Marcus Rashford now, it's counterproductive to him and the team to keep him in. I'm a big believer in playing your way out. For your best players, play the way out of poor bits of form. I think the old adage, form is temporary, class is permanent. I do think Marcus is a good player. I don't think he's a bad player, but he's having one and it isn't going away. And meanwhile, we've got, one Premier League goal, albeit by him, throughout the entire attack, because I'm not counting Bruno as an attacker, in the Premier League all season. You can't afford to carry him. Get Garnacho in. Give the kid a chance. Give him a chance Wednesday. Don't wait. I would 100% drop Marcus. And I would bring him back into the team eventually, but get him to a point where he's playing like he can do. Because at the minute he isn't. The only time we've seen Marcus Rashford play well this season has been for England. And I couldn't care less about that.
Yeah.
Really.
Bruno Fernandes is another one that just, there's a load of talk about him, not captain material. Keane sort of reiterated that yesterday after the game. Not getting the assist. I think he has got, 2 goals this season?
I forget. I think he's done something on it. I can't remember. Sorry, I should know this. But
no, I think it's 2 goals. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, right. Not his normal numbers, not the same level of production. But still that tendency to look slightly pissed off and petulant when big games aren't going our way. Would you drop him?
Oh yeah, it's Burnley. Sorry, Burnley and Forest won his goals. Yeah. Sorry, and obviously Burnley was a great finish.
Because he was.
I want to give you an answer.
City,
I don't really want to sit on the fence for this one because I feel it's a cop out not to give you an answer one way or the other.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a politician's answer. I wouldn't mind it if he was dropped. Normally, I'd be like, "That is insane. What are you doing?" I wouldn't lose my mind if Ten Hag went, "I'm going to drop you, and I'm going to start a midfield of, I don't know, Amrabat, Annabelle, and Mount." Well, just to pick 3 names who we could start as a midfield 3. I wouldn't be that aghast at that. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, though. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't feel as confident in saying drop Bruno as I do with Marcus because I still feel like Bruno has probably had a slightly better season, though it's not been perfect. And I think he still offers you something when he's having a bit of a bad game, where Marcus at times when he's having a bad game isn't really offering anything at the minute. Yeah. And I take no pleasure in saying that. At least with Bruno, you'll get some work defensively. You'll get a lot of energy and a lot of effort. He'll cover a lot of the pitch. He will pick out some passes that are meaningful. So I'm a little bit more reluctant, but I'm at the sort of stage where if he were to be dropped, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, Ten Hag has gone in off the deep end. What about you?
I think Rashford, actually for both, I would keep playing him.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason that mostly people play top players through bad form. I know you just said the same thing, so I know obviously that's, people get that. But I just think that, no offence to Garnacho, but this season he's looked particularly erratic to me. I think we've struggled to hold the ball when he's playing because he gives it away quite a bit. You can maybe play Mount off the left, but again, has he been any better than Rashford this season?
Can I just ask you this? Because this is a hot topic.
Yeah.
Are you concerned at all about the Mason Mount thing? Or do you think it's just he's maybe not 100% fit? Because the one issue I have with this is we bought a player in who's out of contract in the summer, but we bought him because the manager obviously wanted him.
Yeah.
So we got him in for around 55, I think 60 million with add-ons. Let's just say 55 because everyone else adds on with United.
And he ain't getting any add-ons with the performances so far.
And yet it's almost like the manager, he's not always been 100% fit, doesn't quite know what to do with him. That's a little bit concerning to me because had we bought in, say, lots of other, let's say we bought in 2 strikers, a centre-back, a goalkeeper and Mason Mount, I'd be like, all right then, yeah. But we didn't. And we're still a bit short in other departments. And you think, well, should we have spent that money on Mason Mount if you didn't really know if you wanted him or not? Or do you feel like that's being overstated, the fact the manager doesn't want him? He does want him. It's just at this moment in time, he hasn't got a role to play.
I think the latter. I think he obviously knows or has an idea of how he wants to play him. He must do. Otherwise, he would have vetoed him coming in. And he's got the power. From everything we hear, the manager has the power to say, no, I'm not signing this player if he doesn't want him. Obviously, not everyone he signs is going to be someone he knows and there's someone he's worked with before. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that you need other parts of the club picking players, not just the manager. But I think the problem is because we're losing. If we were winning and Mason Mount wasn't playing, you go, okay, it's fine, he's bringing him in slowly. And you should be able to do that occasionally. Not every transfer works instantly every time.
Jack Grealish at City wasn't an instant success. I know he won the title his first year, but he wasn't a regular.
It wasn't because of it.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I was just saying, sort of preemptive people going, he won the title in his first. He did, but he wasn't a regular. A lot of people questioning it, 100 million for Jack Grealish, what are you doing? Why have you done that? All the rest of it. And now he's one of their most important players.
Yeah, we've got Mateus Nunes for them at the minute. They just spent 55, 60 million quid on, similar to Mount kind of money. Not getting a game for him because he's come in and he's not quite got the system yet, he's not quite got the style yet, he's not quite right. So City do it, but because you're winning in the meantime, you can put 100 million Jack Grealish on the bench for 30 games a season. You can barely play Nunes because you're winning games, and that shouldn't, just because we're poor doesn't mean that the new transfer, the new signing has immediately got to grips with everything straight away. It's unfortunate because everything's a criticism, and we get these lists of who's been a failure and Ten Hag's terrible in the transfer market. Well, no one was saying that Martinez or Casemiro was a failure last season. So this season, all of a sudden, those players, one of them who's barely played and the other one who has dropped off in form, but like you have to constantly sort of prove yourself, and if you don't, you're shit and the manager's shit.
I think that Gary Neville made a good point when he's arguing with Jamie Carragher, and he said that if the kids are always asking for, I'm paraphrasing, if the kids are always asking for treats, and the parents keep buying him treats, do you blame the kids?
Yeah.
So when Ten Hag says, I want Antony, and then the board went, yeah, all right, sound. It's 100 million, but we'll get him for you. I want Casemiro. We're going to get Casemiro 70 million on a 4-year deal for a 30-year-old. Yeah, sound. Like, if you'll keep making, I want Mason Mount, yeah, you can have him, we'll get him, yeah. Like, is that necessarily Ten Hag's fault if some of these signings are now being questioned, or is that the owners and the board for sanctioning deals that, in the cold light of day, maybe don't make that much sense?
Yeah.
Just maybe you go, we can't give Casemiro a 4-year deal plus another option.
But we were fucked. That's the thing. Yeah. When did we sign him? After we just lost to Brentford and Brighton.
It's so reactionary.
Like, it was so reactionary.
70 million plus another however many millions, tens of millions in wages, because we've just been battered off Brentford.
Yeah, and I think it's too early to say with Mount as well. But that was why
and
we signed
the
Casemiro.
same, wasn't it? It was like Antony and Casemiro. Yeah. At one point, it was going to be Arnautovic and Rabiot.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it was Antony, who we hadn't paid the 35 million for 2 months earlier, for 75 up to 100 million euros, and Casemiro. It was. But I know you've got a lot of super chats, so I'll let you get into them, and then we'll continue.
Yeah, and I want to sort of transition this chat to upstairs a little bit as well, because we're talking about who we're signing, why we're signing them. The people in charge of that may be getting an overhaul, and we can have a look at why and who's coming in. So we've got some super chats. Get your chats in, get your super chats in as well. We'll be reading some chats as well as super chats. Neil Crode says Bruno and Rashford need to pull a Sancho in order to get dropped by Ten Hag. Also, have you seen those pictures of City flags outside the dressing room?
I haven't seen the pictures of City flags outside the dressing room.
Just on the pin to the wall, isn't it?
I'm barely mustering any sort of emotion around that. I'm just like, like it's like when they beat us at that time, and all the players were cheering and chanting and everything, and Jose went around there, didn't he? And then Lukaku and everyone had a bit of a scrap with him, or whatever, a bit of a kick off. It just bores me all that. It just does me head in. I mean, obviously you don't want him taking a mick out of you, but yeah, I don't know what it is. I'm not that fussed at the minute.
Rune says, Ten Hag's comments today about style and players. Why did he buy Martinez and Antony if he didn't want to play a similar style? I think he's lost it. Just on that comment, so let me give you that quote. He got asked if he wanted to and would be able to play the same style he did at Ajax as he did here. Obviously, a lot of questions about what's his style, why can't he implement it, has he got a style? And he said, when we be able to play the same style of football you did at Ajax, never. We'll never be able to play that football because those are different players. That's also not why I came here. There's a slightly longer version of that quote as well, where he says, we are playing different football than I showed at Ajax because I have to, because I can't play the same way. The players decide how you play. Ajax is a very typical and characteristic style of play. With Man United, I will always show different football. I did so last year as well. We play much more direct because the players I have here, because the players I have, the players for that here. So I think the phrasing is slightly cumbersome there, but basically, I have to play more direct because that's what I've got. Do you see that as him giving up? Do you see that on this style of play? Do you see that as him being flexible? Or do you see that as him saying, I want different players because at the minute, I've got to play direct because I've got, Rashford, Bruno, McTominay, whoever, and I can't hold the ball. I can't, play this intricate style because I ain't got the men for it.
Maybe a bit of both, to be honest. I don't know. I think everyone's jumped on that.
A lot of people really don't like that quote.
Yeah, because they're saying, well, you bought Onana, who you had at Ajax. You bought Martinez, who you had at Ajax. You bought Anthony, who you had at Ajax. You've Eriksen, you didn't really have him at Ajax, but he's that type of player that I know he was at Ajax Resi's training for a little while he was recovering from his incident in the Euros. But he seems to be that type of player who can fit into that system. You've got Donny van der Beek there, who you had at Ajax, even though we didn't sign him for United, and he's been injured for most of it. So people looking at it and going, well, why not? You've got all these players that were at Ajax and you made it work with the likes of Dusan Tadic and a lot of these other players. Why can't you do that here? Surely that was why you were brought in. So I understand why people are a little bit baffled by that. But I think he might be just being a little bit protective there of some of the players, and rather than going, well, yeah, I want to do that and I should be able to do it. I think he's being a little bit defensive there. One of the sort of the weird things about Ten Hag's time at United is, after that Brentford game, if you remember the Liverpool game, it wasn't like we beat Liverpool with amazing possession-based, expansive football, if I recall. A lot of it was David De Gea was hitting it long for a lot of that game. Yes. And we had the likes of Sancho, Martial and Rashford hitting them on the break, because they did a tackles, let's be honest. And that won us the game. That style won us the game. And then if you look at the City game and even the Arsenal game to a certain degree, a lot of it was counter-attacking. Yeah. It wasn't like we dominated the midfield or dominated possession, or we had a high press going on, or the fullbacks were just constantly bombing forward. I know the fullbacks did get forward a lot last season under Ten Hag, but a lot of it again was you remember the derby, obviously the controversy over the Bruno and Rashford goal, and the Garnacho sort of tearing them apart as well. It wasn't like it was a certain style we go, that's just like he did at Ajax. But no one cared because you're winning. Yeah. No one went, why have we just won the Carabao Cup playing a different way than what you used to play like at Ajax? Why is Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Diogo Dalot, I know they got subbed, Dalot got subbed for Wan-Bissaka. Why are they concentrating on marking Alan Saint-Maximin and not bombing forward like they should be, which is what you used to at Ajax? No one cared because we won. We won a trophy, we won matches. So everyone's happy with it. It's only when you start losing that people go, the style. Why are you not playing the Ajax style? I couldn't care less, really, if I'm being brutally honest, if he didn't play the Ajax style yesterday and we'd won. I don't care about the style if we're winning games. The issue you've got now is we're losing football matches and it doesn't look like the style of football is even there, let alone is a good one. Yeah. So that's why he's getting quizzed about it. And I think he's probably just gone a little bit defensive there. Yeah. And I think he's slightly damned if he does, slightly damned if he doesn't. I think some of his comments have been a little bit odd, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not going to give him a complete, I'm not going to dismiss everything he said and defend everything he said, because some of it, I think you've not done yourself any favours there. But that one, I'm sort of edging towards giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. I think we should talk a little bit about above the manager, because we've seen, obviously, Jim Ratcliffe looks like he's going to be coming in. We've got some more super chats we'll go through in a little bit. But this 25% is going to go to Jim Ratcliffe unless something radical changes. There's been reports of Dave Brailsford, other people coming in as well underneath that. Dave Brailsford and Jim Ratcliffe coming in maybe on the board, maybe just as a sort of a team. We're not sure if that'll be one or two people on the board. I guess the specific details don't matter too much. But the other suggestion is that Richard Arnold, the current CEO, and John Murtough, the current sporting director or football director, I'm not sure the exact title, but basically the director of football, will go if he comes in. So firstly, should we have a look at who Richard Arnold is, how he's got the job, where he's come from, what his credentials are, and who he might be replaced by? So Richard Arnold, we were looking before, sort of is an accountant, isn't he? He's not a footballing person, which in the CEO role you can kind of maybe have. You don't necessarily have to have a great footballing mind in it, but obviously it would be nice if someone had worked in football previously. He came through as the managing director of a company called Global Crossing Limited, which it's a telecommunications company. I think they helped with Orange. Do you remember when they became EE?
Yeah.
Orange. He sort of worked a bit for them. So that was kind of...
We've all had them sort of jobs.
That was kind of his background. He was in the marketing division. Then in 2007 went straight from there to working at Manchester United as a group commercial director. So he's sort of been promoted within United since 2007. So the one thing he has got on his...
16 years.
Yeah, the one thing he has got on his CV is that he's been at United for a long time. But he's got no footballing experience other than at Manchester United. Does that bother you?
Not really.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. I didn't like Ed Woodward a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I think the word despised wouldn't be too strong. I think he was the architect of the Glazers buying Manchester United. It was him that came up with the plan and the leverage buyout and facilitated that, made it happen. He was then given the job after David Gill moved on, and gave himself the title of executive vice chairman, which I don't think anyone else has ever had at United, and anyone else has got in the Premier League. It's just a nonsensical title, and I just didn't like the way he went around about his business. I think he was too sort of reactionary, too egotistical, and just wasn't a good person to be arguably the most important man at the club. I think he was even more important than the managers at times, because he sacked the managers and hired other ones, and he seemed to have control over transfers and stuff. So I didn't like Ed Woodward, and when we did that live that night when the Super League was crumbling, Ed Woodward announced he was leaving, I was happy about that. I thought, yeah, good riddance to bad rubbish. Richard Arnold's come in. I've not seen much from him, but he obviously had that bit where he met with the fans at his pub. Some people say, oh, he's good, he was willing to talk to the fans. I haven't seen much of him other than that. And I don't mind that if I don't see much of the CEO. I don't really want to see anything of him. So you're always going to be critical of him because he worked for the Glazers and all the rest of it, but I haven't got a massive opinion on Richard Arnold. I don't particularly care whether he leaves or not. Maybe I should. Maybe you look at that and you go, Jay, what are you on about? He hasn't got a good enough CV to do what he's doing at United. Fair enough, but he's not someone who, I find very emotive in the way I did with Woodward. I didn't like Ed Woodward. I really didn't.
In terms of his replacement then, and we'll get onto John Murtough in a minute, but the current sort of favourite for Richard Arnold's replacement, if he is to go, is a bloke called Jean-Claude Blanc. Do you know much about him?
Jean-Claude Blanc?
Jean-Claude Blanc.
Who doesn't?
Go on then.
Well, he's not British. He's from overseas.
Overseas? Overseas, the most county cricket word in the world.
I think he's European.
He is European, yeah.
If memory serves.
Yeah.
He's a white bloke.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's, and he's got a background in people.
Yeah, very good. He's a French businessman, and he worked, he got a master's from Harvard, stuff like that. So
Harvard?
He's smart.
A master's?
Yeah.
I got mine from Salford, bro.
Yeah, that's the real quiz.
Exactly.
So he went into Juventus, and I think in the early 2000s, before all that.
There's a sterling example on your CV.
Yeah.
I was at Juve before it all went wrong.
He was. I don't think he oversaw that. Maybe he did actually.
Yeah.
But he was part of them getting their new stadium, which was the first new stadium since 1990, apparently in Italy. So that was a bit of a thing, getting rid of the old
Stade d'Alpe.
Stade d'Alpe. Yeah. Then he went to PSG. And sort of oversaw them going from being this sort of no one's ever heard of them 2010-ish up until what they are now, which obviously you could argue is more good than bad, but still a lot of bad. But they've won 50 trophies. They've gone from being this no-name, club to being one of the most recognisable brands in the world.
What you don't want at your club, PSG?
I can see that argument.
Like, yes, they've had loads of money. Yes, they've had Neymar, they've had Messi, they've had Mbappe, obviously, and they've won like League 1 almost every year for the last decade or whatever. But it does seem like it's the lunatics are running the asylum there. They haven't really done what they should have done in the Champions League.
No.
The contracts they give people are insane.
Ballistic.
Yeah, and then they had this window that everyone, the greatest summer window ever where Donnarumma and Ramos and Messi and everyone else went there.
Yeah, Hakimi
and Wijnaldum and everyone. It's like, we've got all these players and we're going to win everything. And it's just flat to deceive.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm a bit like...
But I think the one thing for me, I agree with you, and I don't think PSG is the way to run a club at all.
No.
The one thing I would say is I do like at least he has experience of running top clubs.
Okay.
He's not going to be overawed by the idea of working at Manchester United. I like that.
Yeah.
I want someone who has got experience. You look at a CV of someone, and when they get the job at Manchester United, you think, this is light. We're hiring people straight out of uni.
Like when they've been manager at Everton for 10 years and not won out.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And instead, if you want to run Man United like a business, which everyone seems to, that's what the Glazers want to do. You know, I'm sure to a certain extent Jim Ratcliffe will as well, but maybe slightly less than the Glazers, hopefully. You certainly want to be successful on the pitch. And you need someone who has done that at other clubs.
Well, did you see Pep's quote? The quote that everyone sort of took as a dig at United.
Yeah.
About why a City's so successful. And he said it's because, and I'm paraphrasing it, I'm sure you're going to bring it up, but he basically said myself, the CEO, the coaching staff and the owners or whatever, the chairman, are all on the same page. We all work together. And people looked at that and sort of thought, even if he didn't mean it, it kind of is a dig at United, because that has been the biggest criticism of United over the last 15 years or whatever, or not 10 years since Fergie retired, is that the owners, the boardroom, the chairman, the executive vice chairman, the CEO, the manager are all just on different wavelengths.
Yeah. And
they don't work together well. It's not a cohesive, well-structured club with a strategy. It's a manager comes in and, you know, demands some transfers. We give him in for a bit and then we stop giving him in. Then we sack him and bring someone else in who wants to get rid of the previous manager's transfers, and we do it all again. So it did feel like sort of what Pep was saying was, you know, a dig at United, but also it is, I've said this before, and I know that people will go on about Pep and Pep, how wonderful he is as a manager, and he's obviously a very talented manager, there's no disputing that, and he's taken City to a different level in what they're doing now than what they were doing before he got there. But they won the title with Pellegrini. When Pep Guardiola arrived at City, they'd won 2 of the last 4 titles, I think.
Yeah.
Manuel Pellegrini and Roberto Mancini are good managers. They're not the best ever. They're not elite level. They're not Ancelotti or Guardiola or Sir Alex Ferguson or even Jurgen Klopp levels.
No.
The reason they'd won a title is because that club and that structure is geared towards success. So you can get a Pellegrini in, and he can come in and he can spend a couple of seasons at your club, however long it was, and win you some trophies, including the title. Roberto Mancini can come in, he can win you an FA Cup and a Premier League title because he's got a good structure there, and with owners and a chairman and a director of football who know what they're doing. And then you get someone in like Pep Guardiola, who, let's not forget, left Bayern Munich under a slight cloud in the sense that they hadn't quite done what they wanted him to do in Europe. And he goes there, he has one season where he's getting his bearings, and then the next season they get 100 points. It's like, yes, he's very talented, I'm not disputing that, but it's geared towards success, that club. Yeah. And it's not the same at United.
Well, as he says, we're in the same direction. Me, the CEO, the sporting director, is the chairman. That's why I think the club is so stable.
Can you imagine a Manchester United manager saying that?
No.
If Ten Hag said that, he'd get sectioned.
Yeah.
The men in white coats,
he'd get sacked.
The men in white coats would be coming to take him away. They'd be like, what are you on about?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
How'd you work that one out, bro?
No, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, Pep's probably telling the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's not just him. Obviously, he's a massive part of it, and he's the most important cog in that machine. But everything else is geared towards success.
Yeah.
To the point where it pains me to say it, I don't harbour this sort of expectation and hope that once Pep Guardiola leaves, it all comes crumbling down. Because they were winning titles before he got there. I hope it does. I hope they get relegated, but I don't see it happening.
No, me neither. I mean, let's move on to the footballing director, sporting director, whatever you want to call it, John Murtough. He's someone that I didn't realise until recently came to the club with David Moyes, didn't he? He came from Everton.
Another example of the David Moyes effect.
And obviously,
well, he did for us.
Obviously, that means that he's obviously that means that he does have more of a footballing background, but it's a relatively sort of mediocre one. Then he's been at United for a number of years. He was worked in different departments. Then obviously eventually was promoted to the footballing director. What have you made of him?
I was told from someone that I trust that he's not as talented as he thinks he is.
Right.
And I'm not ITK. Anyone knows me knows I'm not ITK. I'm not pretending I am. But I remember years ago someone saying to me, like, he works at United, like, he ain't great, this guy. That didn't really massively affect my thoughts on him. What affects my thoughts on him is what I see in terms of transfers and stuff. But I've been underwhelmed.
Yeah.
Really have been. And I just don't see what this guy's bringing to the table. United's transfer policy has been one of the worst in world football since Fergie retired, if not the worst. Like, we have spent and wasted
it might be the worst.
so much money. What is it? £1.5 billion, and not won a Premier League title. Not finished within 6 points of a Premier League title. Not won anything in Europe other than a Europa League. I'm not dismissing the Europa League, but let's be honest here. That is almost impressive. You can spend that amount of money and win so few trophies and finish so far away from the Premier League title winners.
If you look at the net spend, the clubs with the highest net spend over the last decade.
Yeah, don't talk about spend, talk about net spend.
You've got West Ham, which is bizarre.
Hello, is that West Ham? Yeah.
In 10th. Then you've got AC Milan, Tottenham, Barcelona, Newcastle, City, and then you get in the top ones. City, Arsenal, PSG, Chelsea, United. United are top.
Like, what is that about? That's net spend as well. So everything about our transfers has been important. The thing is, you might go, okay, up until a certain point during that period, Edward was so hands-on that John Murtough was sort of, he was hamstrung a little bit in what he could and couldn't do. He had to sort of answer to Ed Woodward. There were certain things he could have done. He wanted to do that he couldn't do, or whatever. But there's no denying that for the past 2 years at least, John Murtough has been heavily involved in transfers. And we're still a mess.
Yeah.
We are. And I remember reading a few stories, because I was doing a paper talk one morning, and you can tell the club have briefed the press, because all of a sudden all these newspapers have got to say a similar opinion.
Yeah.
Or a similar take on it. And you think, why?
Yeah, 4 papers have the same story all on the same day.
Yeah, and it's all the same angle.
Yeah.
And you think, well, that's a bit weird. Maybe the club have done something here and gone, yeah, here's what's happening, and here's why it's happening, and here's how we think it should be interpreted. Mm-hmm. And it was about the Mason Mount signing. And it was basically praising John Murtough for the Mason Mount signing.
Yeah.
On how this shows United have turned a corner with transfers, because there's no longer this 2-week period of negotiations or a month period of negotiations where United end up paying massively over the odds for a player. We've now gone in there and we've got a player that Chelsea wanted to keep, and we've got him for a price that we're happy with, and Chelsea have probably lowered their expectations a little bit. This is a real coup for United. And I thought, who the hell has written this?
Yeah.
What are you on about?
I know.
We've got a player who's out of contract in 8 months, off a team that have got about 39 midfielders. Yeah. Like, it's not that deep.
It's a fine deal.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's a fair deal.
Yeah.
But also, this is after the season before, like we just said, where we overpaid for Anthony and also got him too late to make a difference in those first 2 games. Did the same with Casemiro, and it was those people doing the negotiations that time.
And it was like,
that's proper like, I ain't killed anyone in a few days. Give me a pat on the back. Well, we do remember when you did. Yeah. And this Mason Mount deal, like you said, it was a decent deal, one that you can say, probably fair for both teams. But it was hardly like, look how brilliant we are.
This wasn't Alvarez going to City.
No.
Or us getting Chicharito, if you want to go back in time further.
Yeah.
This was basically a club buying a player off another club for a price that both clubs are happy with.
Yeah.
That was it. And it was being sort of reported as this coup.
Yeah.
And this shining example of why John Murtough is so brilliant. And I thought, hang on. Has John Murtough written this himself? Like, it's nonsense. And I've just been massively underwhelmed by him. There's not one transfer that has impressed me on Murtaugh's watch.
The one I wouldn't say it's impressed me.
Is Bruno him?
No, I think Bruno was Woodward.
Right.
The one that I wouldn't say it's impressed me in terms of, I don't think we got a bargain, but I think going for someone like Hojlund was a good idea. I think that obviously we spent loads of money, and so I don't think it was an amazing deal, but I think he was someone that was a bit more of a left field choice. But again, I don't know if John Murtough picked him, and he certainly spent shitloads of money on him.
Exactly, 70 million quid for a player who has 27 professional goals in his career, or whatever it is. Scored 8 league goals last season. I'm not knocking Hojlund, I like the kid, but you're paying top whack for a player who the jury's out on. Like, I think he will come good. By the way, I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way. I'm not having a dig at Rasmus Hojlund. But the issue I have with that transfer is Rasmus Hojlund should only have been brought in really in an ideal world, with someone else being brought in alongside him.
Yeah,
maybe you buy a Zlatan or sign a 35-year-old who has got a season left in him and a Rasmus Hojlund, and then you can go, Zlatan's going to start every week, and Rasmus Hojlund's going to start some games or be subbing others, and we're going to bring him in gradually. Not we're so reliant on Rasmus Hojlund that we signed him when he was injured because we need him, and also as soon as he's fit, we're throwing him back in, throwing him straight into the team, and we keep playing him even when he stops going because we haven't got any other options because Martial's made of glass, and you can't play Marcus Rashford down the middle. Yeah. It's poor. Yeah. It is just poor.
In terms of his replacement, then Paul Mitchell has been pretty much the only name I've seen mentioned. He's been linked with United for a long time. I think he either is from nearby or lives nearby.
Yeah,
it sort of
I
would
think
make
he lives,
sense.
He lives in Cheshire, I think.
Yeah, would make sense sort of geographically. And then you look at his CV, and it is genuinely one where you go, "Oh right, look what he's done."
Go on, then. That's all me.
So he started off at Milton Keynes. Then he got a job at Southampton when they were in the Championship as head of recruitment. That happened to be just before they got promoted. Then Pochettino came in, and then Pochettino took him from Southampton to Spurs with him, where they signed the likes of Heung-min Son, Kieran Trippier, Toby Alderweireld, Dele Alli. He then left Tottenham in 2016, and there was rumours that he'd fallen out with Daniel Levy. He had, issues around who they're getting in and his ability to buy players. Then he went to become the head of recruitment at RB Leipzig, and in his first window they signed players like Mateus Cunha, who's now at Wolves. I think they got loads of money for him. Nordi Mukiele, another one who's highly rated. They got Emil Smith-Rowe on loan. They also, at that point they had, started qualifying for Champions Leagues and pushing, but they went from being a team that was sort of in and around the top six to one that was challenging regularly for not the Bundesliga but those top European spots, and just became a much bigger sort of entity across the world. They got loads of money as well, so it's not all Paul Mitchell. However, he was again there for a successful period of a club. He then left there. I think he was given the offer of overseeing Red Bull's entire global footballing strategy, which would have been Salzburg, New York Red Bulls, all that. Instead, he went to Monaco as sporting director in 2020, and they went from being sort of mid-table team that had struggled to kind of bridge that transition from where they were a few years ago to, I think they're currently second or top of the league. I think they finished very high up last season again as well. Let me just double check that. He has just got a good record. Monaco finished sixth last season, so they're on their way back from where they had been. They got relegated, didn't they, a couple of years ago? So he seems to have a good track record, and obviously there's some misses in there. Not everything's perfect, but just a list of a few players again that he signed. He brought Sadio Mane to Southampton, which is obviously a massive signing for them. That was brilliant, and then they sold for loads of profit. You got Tadic to Southampton, Toby Alderweireld, as I already mentioned, to Spurs, Heung-min Son to Spurs from the Bundesliga, Trippier to Spurs, Konate as well brought him into Leipzig. Now he's obviously at Liverpool. Konrad Laimer, another one that he brought into Leipzig, who now is playing for Bayern Munich as a great sort of utility player there. Just very, very talented players. Christopher Nkunku, another one that he brought to Leipzig from PSG. Just there are mistakes, there are things that have gone wrong, there are question marks here and there, but he's someone that has had certainly a lot of success in his job, in different clubs, at different levels. He's maybe lacking that real high-end club on his CV, a United, a City, a Barca, PSG, one of these sort of mega clubs. He's lacking one of them. But other than that, he's done brilliantly. It makes a lot of sense to bring someone like that in. His CV works.
The thing is, it does. But the big sort of question is, can he work with Ten Hag?
Yeah.
Because that CV to me is very impressive. I like it. I like the fact that he went to Southampton and signed players it was basically Southampton's golden period, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That period under Pochettino when all those players were coming in. I remember that if you look, the few of those starting 11s, when you look back at them, you're like, crikey. Yeah. That's amazing. The players they've got in that team for a sort of 18-month period or whatever it was. Spurs obviously did very well on a slightly limited budget in terms of going up against the Uniteds, the Arsenals, the Cities and the Chelseas. They didn't have quite the same amount of spending power, but did very well and were always in and around the top sort of 3 or 4 places. So I'm impressed with that. I'm impressed with the fact he obviously knows European football, knows European players.
Yeah.
I think Steve's raved about him. Steve's always into this kind of thing, which does,
he loves it.
Yeah, it does sort of make me think that this would be a good appointment. But he has to be able to work with the manager. He has to be, because otherwise, like what Pet was saying there about how his relationship with the chairman and the director of football, they're all on the same page. It's got to be the same with Erik ten Hag and Paul Mitchell, because let's not forget the original plan was to have Ralph Rangnick in some sort of overseeing role, whether that was an advisor or whatever. And it became increasingly obvious that Ten Hag didn't want anything to do with that. Yeah. Now, obviously, Ralph Rangnick got offered the Austrian job as well, but you still question whether he took that because he knew he wasn't wanted at United, or whether he was going to do both roles originally and then just focused on that because Erik ten Hag just didn't want to have anything to do with him. So Erik ten Hag might be on board with this, and he might be like, look, this guy's great, yep, let's work together. Or he might be, I don't need this guy telling me what to do. I've been making my own transfers so he can bore off. So that's my only question there. I like the idea of Paul Mitchell coming in. I just hope that he can work with the manager.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it might be worth having a look at Dave Brailsford as well, who is sort of a bit more well known, but not everyone will have heard of him. So he'd be the one that would be coming in.
Dave Brailsford sounds like someone you went to school with.
Yeah.
Like
I used to have a football coach called Terry Brailsford.
Did you?
And it's just a bloke who lived in Worksop.
Yeah. I remember Dave Brailsford. He was sitting next to me in Ari.
Yeah.
It sounds like one of them, doesn't it?
So he's, for those who don't know, or whatever, was the sort of, who don't know, or may have forgotten, it may have slipped their mind, don't know or don't care. He was the sort of the mind behind British cycling for like 10, 15 years, wasn't he? So he came in. What are you laughing at?
It's just whatever.
Yeah, whatever, don't matter. So in 2004, at the Olympic Games, Britain won 2 gold cycling medals, which was their best return since 1908. So that was excellent at the time. Yeah. 2 gold medals was excellent. Then under Brailsford, they just continued to improve, better and better and better and better. They led the cycling medal table at 2008 and 2012 Olympics. 8 golds both times, 59 gold World Championship medals across different disciplines from 2003 to 2013. So obviously, people questioned some of his things since. He unquestionably utterly revolutionised British cycling.
Yeah.
Like, it's the marginal gains thing. You might have heard people say it and not know. That sort of, he's not the only one who ever did it. But his whole thing was, break down everything a cyclist does in their day, in their training, in everything. If you can improve every single thing by 1%, you will see massive changes at the top end when you put all that together. Training, what they eat, time asleep, time awake, just tracking and improving everything by a little bit. That was his whole thing, the marginal gains philosophy. And we took Britain from being, 2 gold medals in Olympics, the best in 100 years, to the most dominant cycling system in the history of athletics, basically. And a system, that 1% marginal gains thing, that's been adopted by pretty much every other cycling team and a lot of other athletics teams.
Yeah.
Like, he is revolutionary in that regard. Then he went to Sky and Team Ineos, where I think Bradley Wiggins, Chris Froome, Geraint Thomas won between them the 2012, 2013, 2015, 2016, 2017 and 2018 Tour de France's. And I think a British cyclist hadn't won it in years.
I remember when Bradley
that.
Wiggins won it, because I was a reporter.
Yeah.
And I went down to his village. He lived near Wigan, I think it was. And we went down to his village, and all the British press were there, looking for him. He'd gone out like at 5 a.m. on his bike, obviously, so no one had seen him. But then you interviewing his landlord, his hairdresser was there. I remember sounds
crackers.
Haircut
people liked
because he had that mod look.
Yeah.
So I interviewed his hairdresser, and as I was interviewing his hairdresser, the telly was on, and the news was showing an earlier interview of his hairdresser on the that's how big.
One.
Yeah,
this hairdresser's been interviewed 60 times.
Yeah, it was crazy. But the point I'm sort of stumbling towards is that was massive.
Yeah,
British cyclist, get there in the end, winning the Tour de France, and then it became almost the norm,
commonplace. Yeah, and that is obviously. Doesn't mean that you're going to be great as whatever. He's currently the director of sport for Ineos. So he oversees Nice a little bit. He oversees the cycling stuff. There's some pushback on that.
I do, part of me, right? And Sir Jim Ratcliffe's bid, there's flaws with it. I don't like the idea of Glazers staying around. And, there's other aspects of it. They only 25%. What's that going to look like? It does worry me. But there is a part of me that goes, okay, this guy is Britain's richest man. for a reason. Also, it's his name that is going to be associated with all this. I don't see him coming into United to just fail. I don't see him coming into United to just finish 4th. I don't see him coming into United to win the Carabao Cup once every 6 years. I don't see that happening. I think, now he might not succeed. Just because you want to succeed doesn't mean you will. But I can't see him coming in without that sort of desire and expectation and understanding of, look, if this fails, it's going to be a failure for me. And it'll be the thing that 99% of people that remember me will remember me as the guy that failed at United. All the Ineos stuff and the cycling stuff and everything else he's done, the vast majority of people won't know him for that. No. The vast majority of people never heard of Jim Ratcliffe before he became involved in the United takeover. And he was Britain's richest man. Yeah. But if you stop someone in the middle of, if I went out there in Piccadilly and said he had, 2 years or 3 years ago, it was Sir Jim Ratcliffe, they wouldn't have a jar of glue. No. Once he was involved in United, everyone knows who he is. And that's not because we're in Manchester, that's across the world almost. Yeah. So I can't see him coming in without doing everything in his power to make it a success. Yeah. Now you might go, well, what about Nice? It's a completely different kettle of fish.
And also, just on Nice, yes, there's been times where the fans have disliked him, and that may still be the case, and he's not, won trophies and conquered the league. But again, let's remember who he's up against here in PSG. But they're currently top of the league, which isn't nothing. If you want to give Postecoglou credit at Spurs and their structure and all that, then I think it's fair to give Nice a bit of credit. They're top of the league, ahead of PSG. They've not lost this season. They've got a new manager, Francesco Farioli, who's sort of an understudy to De Zerbi's 34-year-old manager who's come in and won loads of games. Like, there's something exciting going on there. There was a time when it was Aaron Ramsey and sort of these kind of fallen heroes almost playing for him a bit of retirement home.
Not what you want.
Yeah. Whereas now there seems to be a slight tweak, a slight shift in idea that so far anyway, 10 games in, has put them top of the league. So there is some reason to be hopeful, even if you're a Nice fan.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at that,
hopeful's the word.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't expect Sir Jim Ratcliffe to come in and United win everything.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that could happen if you let me hedge my bets. What's the I know there's still super chats there.
I'll go through some of the chats
through them before we wrap up and go to Wally of the week.
Yeah, Matt Wick says, I think there's an element of wanting to tie his name to the revival of a British institution with Sir Jim, which, to be honest, is what we need. Need to respect how massive we are and should be in all ways. I agree with that to a certain extent. I think from Jim Ratcliffe's perspective, he's thinking, I'm a boyhood Man United fan. Whether he still is or not, there seems to be no doubt that he was a United fan growing up, and he's from near Manchester. I'm 70 whatever years old, 71 years old. I'm Britain's richest man, and currently my legacy is did pretty good with the Tour de France in a team that was already winning. All right with Nice, not great, and I've got a big petrochemicals company. He wants, like you said, the fame, the glory, the success of taking United out of the hands of the parasitic Glazers and returning them to the top. I'm sure he wants that.
That's what Kieran Maguire said years ago on this channel. Kieran Maguire nailed it when Sir Jim Ratcliffe was bidding for Chelsea. He said, look, that bid that's lower than anyone else's and it's late ain't a proper bid. He said he's 70 odd years old, or he's 70 years old or whatever he was, or 69 at the time. He said, I think he's thinking more about his legacy rather than what he's going to achieve in life for the next 10, 20 years. He's not be around. It's unlikely he's going to be around for 20 years, with all due respect. So he's going to think about how he's going to be remembered. And reviving Manchester United, your boyhood club, would be a phenomenal way to be remembered. So again, maybe it's wishful thinking, but there's a little bit of fire to that smoke.
Yeah. Let's go through a few super chats. Burnside is back. Says, gents, Ten Hag is on a lifetime plus 10 goal difference at United. -5 this year. The excuses are baffling. Check Ole's under the same time frame. The question, how far did the appointment of Ralph Rangnick set this club back?
I don't think it had a massive effect in setting the club back. I think what set us back more was the sense that we appointed him and gave up on that season almost immediately. Yeah. We didn't make any signings in January. Some of his suggestions were great, but some of them weren't realistic, if we're going to be honest about it. I think he said Diaz after he'd signed for Liverpool. So that was never going to happen. But there was definitely an element of him making some good suggestions, and when he spoke about the club and the state he was in, he was telling the truth. I don't know if it massively set us back. I think that whole sort of season was heading that way anyway, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Fergal McClements, call me deluded, but there's been a lot of possible butterfly moments in big games. If we beat Arsenal with that minimal offside and score first against Spurs, don't let City go 1-up. What if? I mean, I think there is a little bit of that, but I think overall, like we said, the worrying thing is the other games, the Brentfords, the Brightons, even the Wolves game. I know we won. The Forest game. I know we won. Galatasaray. These are the ones that really worry me.
How many games we had this season?
Wow, somewhere
13?
in the region of 14.
13, 14?
Yeah.
How many have we played well in? For an entire game?
Well, for an entire game, 1.
Like, I get your point, and I agree with it. And it annoyed me about that penalty decision because they're never giving us a penalty. No. And now no one cares because we got battered anyway. And it's like, well, you would have lost anyway. But it does matter.
It does matter.
Because you don't give those as penalties. So why have you started now?
I know.
It's just ridiculous that happens in every single game.
It happened multiple other times in the game yesterday.
Oh, it's just ludicrous.
It was a bizarre one. Coach Zach with a super chat, he's been a member for 34 months. Thank you very much. Well done, Zach. Says, unpopular opinion, firing Moyes set the precedent that if you don't try, the manager will be replaced, not the players. We've seen from that point forward. I think hiring Moyes was the real issue. I understand the thing. I get the point, though.
But I don't think David Moyes had it in him to be a success at Manchester United.
Yeah, I agree. Fergal McClements says, meant to be fine margins that go either way, i.e. City pen going to City. Happened to us so much already. Spurs penalty, Arsenal Hojlund penalty / offside. Big what ifs. That's similar to the point before, I agree. Ant L says, we've been poor since Barca and getting worse. Abhinav Verma, regardless of what style you want, you need to be supremely fit. The condition of the players isn't up to scratch for any style other than transitional. Ian Daniels, do you think the sporting director stops this overpaying and takes the heat off Ten Hag regarding signings? I hope so. I've been saying this so much. We need a sporting director that has a backbone and a reputation. Because there comes a point, there's 2 problems with this, and I was saying this to you before when we were going for lunch, and I'll say it again. Ten Hag at the moment, the people above him, if they came out and said, if John Murtough came out and said, I'm betting my reputation, everything I've done before, on the fact that Erik Ten Hag is the right man for Man United, people would laugh and go, what reputation? Yeah. What experience, what knowledge do you have to tell me that Ten Hag will turn this around? Nothing. If you bring in someone like whoever, a Paul Mitchell, Jean-Claude Blanc, someone who's done this, who's worked at other clubs, who's seen success and seen failure, and they said, I'm putting my reputation on the fact, or if, I'm putting my reputation on the fact that Ten Hag is the right manager for this club, you might go, okay, they see something, and maybe there's a reason to trust them. And that works the other way as well. If John Murtough goes to Ten Hag and goes, what are you on about Anthony? He's not good enough. I'm betting my reputation on all the transfers I've done that Anthony isn't good enough for Manchester United. I'm not spending 80 million quid on him. Ten Hag would laugh at him. Yeah. What reputation? Yeah. What experience do you have to tell me that Amrabat isn't good enough, or Eriksen, or Anthony, or Casemiro aren't good enough for Man United? None. This is why you need good people at every level. Because at the minute, I think Ten Hag is making too many decisions regarding transfers. And the problem is, the alternatives aren't any better. You either leave it to the scouts who have bought in bang average people over the last 10 years. You leave it to John Murtough, who we've got no evidence is any good at picking a player and getting a transfer over the line. You need people who are good at every level, because sometimes they have to disagree with each other and they have to fight each other. And you need people making good decisions, saying to Erik Ten Hag, sorry mate, we're not doing that. And I know better than you actually, because I'm really good at this. We don't have that, and that is a massive problem at Man United. So I agree with you. Do you think a sporting director stops his overpaying and takes the heat off transfers, off Erik Ten Hag for transfers? Yes, and I think we are desperately in need of that. Akash Solomon says, Jay, spot on with a lack of collaborative leadership with Ten Hag on transfer. With Ten Hag on transfer oversight. Feel like a kid watching another messy divorce, losing one, Ten Hag, staying with the other, players who will try for a bit and then stop again. Yeah, it
does feel a little bit like, doesn't it? You know what I mean? You're going to be there in a few weeks' time, and Jadon Sancho's going to return to the squad, and it's going to be like, this just feels like Pogba and Jose all over again. I know it's different circumstances because Pogba was never banned from training or whatever, but it's going to have that similar-ish feeling in it. Yeah. Like, now we can come out and play because the grown-ups have left. And that'll be sad if that happens. Any more, Freddie Moore?
Yeah, we've got quite a few. T-Man4 says, can't give the manager every signing he asks for. If he gets sacked, we're screwed. Need a competent director of football to assess requests. That's, exactly what I was just saying there. Abhinav Verma, a director of football doesn't just sign players. So this narrative that Ten Hag didn't want a director of football because he wanted control on signings is lacking of logic. Ant says apathy starts at the top and oozes down like slime.
True.
Very true. Advait says great clubs figure out how to balance business with the football. The Glazers did not. They see players as assets instead of a team, which means they look for assets that will bring in the most commercial value. I think we saw the real sort of peak of that under Woodward, didn't we? That era of Di Maria's, Pogba, Falcao, Lukaku, these players that a lot of the transfers didn't really make sense. They just knew they'd get a lot of social media likes.
Because even like when that sense happened with Van Gaal, didn't it? He didn't like know what he wanted to do with him.
Yeah.
Or knew what to do with him half the time. Di Maria as a striker and Wayne Rooney as DM. What?
I know. Bill O'Reilly, not Di Maria.
Whilst Herrera was sat on the bench. It's just crazy.
It was crazy. Hojlund was brought in because the club expected Greenwood to play again. Lack of planning from the higher ups, as per usual. That's an interesting point, actually.
There might be something in that, to be fair. I often forget about Mason Greenwood in that equation. And you might have a point, because it might have been like, look, I can't rely on this striker who's, scored 20 professional goals, whatever, and I can't rely on Andy Martial anymore. And that might be one of the reasons why he was happy to buy Mason Mount, because he thought he had other options as a striker. He thought, I've got Mason Greenwood, I've got Rasmus Hojlund, and I've got Andy Martial, plus Marcus down the middle, which isn't great. But if you put all four of those as your options, then okay, it starts to look better. Yeah. So maybe there was an element of that. That wouldn't surprise me, because he was obviously willing to bring Mason Greenwood back into the squad. Yeah. There's no way on God's green earth that Erik ten Hag said no when he was asked about having Mason Greenwood into his squad. I know he publicly didn't say much about it. He sort of sat on the fence a little bit and said it's a club decision. But the club must have spoke to him and said, will you play this kid if we bring you back? And I can't imagine he said no. I think we would have heard something about that. So I think you might have a good point there. Yeah, that maybe Mason Greenwood was viewed as the main striker, or one of the main strikers.
Interestingly,
go on.
Just going back to that Adam Crafton article.
Yeah.
The proposed date for the announcement of Mason Greenwood return to Man United. So this is when Richard Arnold was going to tell the public that Mason Greenwood was returning, was going to be Friday the 4th of August.
Yeah.
We signed Rasmus Hojlund Saturday the 5th of August.
Right.
One day later. So up until that day at least, when this deal with Hojlund was happening, it was under the assumption that Mason Greenwood was going to be playing. I'd never put those two things together before.
No, it's a really good point.
It's a really good point. Yeah. Advait. Yeah, interesting that. Doc Rock says, on top of the overhaul, we need to be willing to rebuild. Our fans are not willing to let us run mid-table for 2 or 3 seasons to build up the young guns and recruit better. Look at Newcastle and Arsenal. Arsenal in particular, isn't it? Pretesh says, it's not that I doubt Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I just don't trust the Glazers. Yeah, there you go. Wally of the week, Jay.
Wally of the week. I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm struggling a little bit for anyone that stands out for me. Tyson Fury's not covered himself in glory, has he? With
no.
That debacle over him. Was it in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Where he fought the other kid whose name escapes me. Thank you. I didn't want to get it wrong. And it just seems like a bit of a shambles, really. I mean, he's got a lot of money for doing it, so I understand why he did it. But I think he turned up half fit, faxed it in, just about got away with it. It was a very controversial decision.
He just about got away with it.
And, it was a bit of like, what was all that about?
Yeah, that was stupid. He clearly just didn't want arse, was he?
No.
Just turned up and I'll beat him easy.
And it just feels like, I don't know, like another sort of black mark on boxing's name, because it's like, what was it about? And also the decision was relatively controversial as well. A lot of people saying it should have gone the other way.
Yeah.
So
I thought Fury just won.
Yeah.
But that in itself is disastrous for Fury. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is terrible. And also, if you want to look at whether there was controversy there, I think it was close. But did you see Usyk was saying afterwards, he was trying to coach Fury. He was telling him, use your jab quicker, jab more. Because he was saying, I've got a fight with this guy that we need to sell.
Yeah.
And if he's just lost to someone who has never boxed in their life, then it's, I probably won't make as much on pay-per-view. So, all of boxing sort of needed Fury to win that.
Yeah.
So, I think that the decision was probably just about right. But if there is a suggestion of foul play, you can see why it would have happened. Who's my Wally of the week?
Take your time, man. There's no rush. There's plenty of potential candidates.
There's lots of them, isn't
this
there?
weekend or the week before the previous week. leading up to the weekend?
I'll tell you what it will be, actually.
Go on.
I think this, like you said before, this idea that, that penalty that Hojlund gave away is just like, yeah, that's always a penalty, what you're on about.
Yeah.
Not even the penalty, not the decision itself, because he did pull him back, but this whole thing of why United fans bothered about that penalty. Like, it's clearly a foul. They never give them.
I hate that.
Stop pretending you don't know that is given one time in 50.
We do this all the time at United, right? When we get a bad decision and the result's bad anyway, it's kind of like we just dismiss the bad decision.
Yeah.
Was it Sheffield United when we played?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
And when the Pogba, whatever the call, said, we got both decisions wrong. Martial should have been a goal and the Sheffield United one shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
That turns the game on its head. There was another one, I think, was it West Brom, where Lindelof got his eyes covered?
Yeah.
And it was like, that shouldn't have been a goal. I think we drew.
Yeah.
And it's like, that would have been a
and
win.
People go, Lindelof should have just been stronger. What should he have done? Just fucking used X-ray vision to see through someone's hand?
Yeah, these are decisions that matter and that went against us. So I just don't get it. I just don't get this idea as a United fan where you go, it doesn't matter. It does matter.
Yeah.
It does. And if we are going to get beat offset, fine, right? That, unfortunately, is understandable. But let's get beaten without nonsensical decisions, because that's never given as a pen. It just isn't.
No.
Like, you see that all the time.
Look at the one on
Watch
Hojlund.
every corner.
The one
Watch
on Hojlund,
them.
where Gabriel wraps his arm around him and falls into him to add extra weight to the tackle. Wasn't given against Arsenal. You just think, this, don't, I get it, he's pulled, but don't pretend that they're given every week, because they're not.
If you're watching that passage of play with Hojlund thing, like, someone's got hold of Marcus, who's trying to get to the ball, and he's stopping him. He's not going for the ball isn't there. He's just stopping him running. So it's like, okay, well, why is that not a foul? It's just, I think it was ridiculously harsh, and I think you don't get them given, so it annoyed me. You may disagree. Joe, always a pleasure having a good old chat. I've appreciated loads of people as well getting involved in the comments and the chat. Some really good ones there. So big thank you to you. It's going to be you in the morning, isn't it, with the news. Although before that, we are previewing the most important game of the season.
It is, actually.
The Carabao Cup game against Newcastle at Old Trafford this Wednesday. Me and Joe have done the preview, so go and check that out, and then he'll be back tomorrow morning with the news. So make sure you are hitting like, share and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that. Joe, where can people find you?
Joe Smith 93 on Instagram and Twitter.
You know where to find me as well. This has been the Paddock Podcast. Thanks for watching.